Okay. I would like to recognize some of the organizations that are in the room that we didn't touch on before. The Missouri Department of Corrections has 2 or 3 tables here. If anybody from the Missouri Department of Corrections, would you raise your hand, stand up, whatever you want to do. Thank you for being here. Thank you for being a part of this. Kansas Department of Corrections is up here on this side, I believe. Everybody from Kansas, would you all wave? Thank you for being another big supporter. We have Nebraska, I'm sorry. Yes, Nebraska's in the room. We already talked to them. Thank you for being here. North Carolina, we planned this date 6 or 8 months out, and unfortunately, the North Carolina Department of Adult Corrections didn't get our memo in time because they ended up planning their statewide reentry conference starting tomorrow. And so many of the people from North Carolina that normally come were not able to come this year. But we have a couple of people from North Carolina. So those from North Carolina, will you wave, stand up, say hi? Thank you for being here. I also want to mention, I mentioned before that we were expecting close to 200 people online. Carrie, can you clue us in as to what states or what places are represented with our virtual attendees?
Absolutely. We have Allen Oakwood in Lima, Ohio. We have a group from Workforce Partnership tuning in, the Foothills Correctional Facility, Norton Correctional Facility, Ellsworth, Stockton, Hutchinson, Lansing, a group from Kansas Department of Commerce, Brown Creek in North Carolina, Tipton in Missouri, Albemarle in North Carolina, Hyde in North Carolina, and a group in St. Joe.
Sounds good. Thank you. So all of those locations are online. Most of those that Carrie mentioned are inside correctional facilities. So staff and residents inside those facilities are joining us today, and we welcome you and thank you for being here. I am going to introduce Danny Elias, who is our incoming board chair. Today actually is my last day as president of the board for Reaching Out From Within. I will be transitioning, I'm staying on the board, but I will be transitioning out of this office. I've served in this position for 6 years. And Danny has been our vice president, and she is coming on board. So I wanted to recognize Danny, let her give her a chance to just say a couple words. And one of the things that we do at our Blue Book group meetings is we share positive thoughts. So Danny has a positive thought that we are going to share. On your tables, there are some positive thoughts. So after she gets done sharing hers, before we start the next panel, if you would turn to someone at your table and share a positive thought also after Danny shares the one for all of us.
Hi, everyone. It's very wonderful to be here with you guys today. Thank you for coming and being a part of this community. I want to thank Greg. I will need all the positive thoughts and encouragement I can get because I've got some pretty big shoes to step into following all the work that he's done here with this symposium and everything he's brought to our organization. So thank you, Greg. My positive thought for us today is the people who succeed aren't the ones who avoid failures. They're the ones who learn to respond to failure with optimism. Thank you, everyone.
So just take 20 seconds and turn to somebody at your table and share a positive thought with them. We can share a positive thought up here.
Hey, I was curious, was Kyle able to get
My positive thought is I'm glad to be here with you
night?
and so many like-minded people. It's a real honor.
He wanted to come.
Appreciate that.
Y'all thought he had to work?
Well, I don't think
It's going to go well.
Yeah.
And
I
it's
think he's
exciting
online,
to
though.
talk
I
about
think he's
what
watching
we
now.
Okay.
Absolutely.
Cool deal.
do. Even if,
Great.
hopefully it goes well.
Yeah. I'd say so far so good this morning.
I think so.
You're over there.
I did want going to tell you, I talked to Nancy a while ago, and I know it's going to be packed today, and y'all got to get out of here this afternoon.
Yeah.
And she gave me her card. I'm going to get in touch with y'all maybe later this week and see if we can
Okay,
find time.
thank
I'm
you
just
for
so
sharing those
interested in
positive
learning more about
thoughts.
What the foundation and what y'all are doing.
And
Yeah, no
continue
problem.
to share those positive thoughts
I can help you with
throughout
that.
the day.
Yeah.
Yeah.
The next panel is the Innovations in Corrections panel. I love this panel because it kind of pushes what we do in corrections to new standards. Gloria mentioned that Kansas is now referring to residents inside their facilities instead of offenders or inmates. That's huge. That's a huge step in being able to make that mental change of how we see people that are inside the facilities. And for them to hear that about themselves, instead of being reminded about the worst thing they've ever done, about reminding that they are an offender, a person who offends other people, that gets into the psyche, right? If we do that day after day after day after day, year after year after year, for 20, 30 more years, that becomes a huge change to be able to say, you know, I'm treated with dignity now, I'm called a resident. This is where I reside, not what I've done in the past. So I thank the Kansas Department of Corrections for being able to do that. I remember the 2019 Symposium that was brought over with the German prison model, right? And so we have taken steps within several years to be able to make that happen here. So appreciate that. And I know Missouri's working on that. And North Carolina, we're working on that also. So appreciate that. But the purpose of this innovations panel is to introduce concepts that are outside the proverbial box, if you will, of typical correctional programming. When appearing on this panel in years previously, Ann Precythe, the director of prisons in Missouri, stated, what we've been doing in corrections hasn't been working for the last 40 years, right? We found out that some of the things that we're doing isn't getting us the results that we want. And so she talked about how can we change what we're doing to be able to get better results. And so that is what this panel is about, hearing from some of the people that are in corrections to find out what we can do differently that's going to get us different results, better results in the future. On this panel, I'm pleased to introduce Director Foley, Trevor Foley, who is the director of the Missouri Department of Corrections. John Powell, who is the director of the Restorative Justice Clinic from Campbell University in North Carolina, who's talking about restorative justice programs down there. And Curtis Taylor, who is the executive director of the Bob Barker Foundation. And he's going to talk about a couple of the programs that they support with the foundation. So let's jump right in. And Director Foley, let's start with you. If you would just explain, introduce yourself, explain a little bit about what you do, how you got the job, and why you're sitting here today. And then tell us a little bit about what the Missouri Prison's doing with the Missouri Prison Transformation Project and some of the other things going on with Missouri.
Thank you, Greg. So my name is Trevor Foley, Director of Missouri Department of Corrections. That's a great question, how I got this job. I'll take any input you may have on that one. I started with the department a little over 25 years ago, freshly out of college. Bought in quickly to the mission of the department. I believe in public safety. I believe in the function that corrections is supposed to serve, even if we historically haven't always done that very well or approached that goal of how to truly achieve public safety well. I ultimately left the department in 2007, a little disillusioned and frustrated. It was a stagnant organization. It was not interested in improvement. It wasn't interested in self-evaluation and analysis. Came back in 2018 from Director Precythe that you mentioned. She assured me that it was a different place. And boy, was she right. Yeah. So she brought me in and said, we will try about anything. There's no bad idea, which is not true. There are some bad ideas. We tried a few of them. Yeah. But we will keep going. Trying to, and her point is exactly right. We know what doesn't work. And not always sure what will work, but we're not going to find it if we don't keep trying. Yeah. Over the past several years, I think we've had a lot of innovations. vocational program. I think one of the biggest things that, for the corrections industry at least, was we started out focusing heavily on our staff, focusing on the culture of our staff, how our staff interacted with each other. That translates to how they interact with the residents and the clients that we supervise. Focusing on the support for them. It's a challenging work environment for them as well. Has some unique traumas and some unique experiences. So being able to help them through that. Focusing on their compensation, their support services, the clear expectations. As odd as it may sound in a paramilitary style organization, the history in corrections always hasn't been real clear about what the expectations for our staff are. They are in terms of duties and what your day looks like and what this process looks like, but not always so clear in the mission. So the establishment of a clear mission that really improving lives for safer communities. We embrace that our public safety role is best fulfilled if the individuals that we supervise and the individuals that we have in our custody leave better prepared to be successful. We have over 52,000 people on probation and parole in the community, over 24,000 people in prison, 96% of which will get out one day. So over 98% of our population is in or will be shortly returning to the community. We should probably focus on that. So while we've done a lot of programming over the years, our new nursery program, embracing peer support specialists, the focus heavily on our staff, a lot of programming in the community that focuses on high-risk individuals. It was all generally tailored at individuals that had already bought into the idea of change. That for whatever reason, their course of life, they had accepted that they wanted to do something different with their life. Even if they were still struggling with issues, they had bought into the idea of changing. And so there were different types of honor housing units and different types of vocational programming, and different things available for them if they had proven that they were ready for it. I think the next step for us is really taking that to the next level, which is rather than work your way to a better environment or a better level of service or better opportunities, you start out at that level. And then to see if the environment can't drive the change rather than people earning their way to an improved environment. So we have 4 wings coming open in the next couple months. Actually, the first wing at our female facility in Vandalia opened last week. Yeah. We were working in partnership with the University of Missouri School of Social Work with some grant funds that we're helping out with Arnold Ventures and testing the Missouri Prison Transformation Project. And it's really just an idea with very minimal criteria for the individuals to live in these units. No major conduct violations for the last 2 years. You've served at least 6 months and you have at least 6 months to serve. Anybody that meets that criteria at these facilities will be randomly selected to live in these units that have a much more normative environment, brighter colors, natural light, noise reduction. Noise is one of the biggest issues that is so harsh about a prison environment. Yeah. Staff receive additional training. They have to apply and be accepted to work in these units. Very heavily focused on engagement and engagement with empathy. A lot of additional, much of the programming that we already have available will be concentrated in these units. And then a big part of it is focusing on connections within the community. To receive services from, to participate in, support philanthropic efforts. Anything that maintains a connection from prison to the community will help these individuals as they go home. And then rather than, for lack of a better term, cherry pick the offenders that will move into these environments, we'll randomly select, and we'll see if the environment itself doesn't drive the change. So that's one of the things I think we're most excited about now. It's time to stop looking for the next great program, and it's time to focus on the environment overall.
Good. That's good. I don't know if this was intentional or accidental, but the work that you're doing with the University of Missouri, I noticed you mentioned that it was with the social work department instead of a criminal justice department. Social work has a different approach. The European-style prison management models rely heavily on a social framework instead of a criminal justice mindset. Wondering if you can speak to that. Was that intentional? Was that accidental? They're the ones that got the grant. How did that come about?
I think they were interested in partnering with us. I think it is a philosophical approach that one of the things that I like about social work that is very unique to a correctional environment is historically corrections treats every individual with a felony the same. Yeah. I mean, you have a felony, therefore you're a known quantity. And social work and so many of the other disciplines allow people to be unique.
Yeah.
They all have different criminogenic factors. They all have different traumas. They all have different backgrounds in life. They all have different desires and levels of change. We need to start recognizing that. Yeah. And quite frankly, the criminology and criminal justice disciplines generally favor more towards law enforcement. Mm-hmm. Law enforcement is different than corrections. It's not better, it's not worse, it's a different role in the criminal justice system. So the approaches and the tools and techniques are going to be different.
I think that's great. I think that's a huge change, so thank you. I asked somebody with Kansas Department of Corrections, I can't remember who it was, it might have been Renda, somebody else, a while back. I said, have we ever had an assault on volunteers in the Kansas Department of Corrections? And at that time, we couldn't think of anybody. It might have been Marcy. We couldn't think of any time that somebody that was a volunteer coming in the Department of Corrections hadn't had an assault case. And yet, sometimes there are cases with correctional officers. And I said, wonder why that difference is. And we came to the fact that correctional officers are often there by the name to correct, right? To correct behavior, to tell you what you're doing wrong, versus a social worker with the mindset of a volunteer coming in to help you. And I thought if we could employ that process of being able to have people that are there to help rather than to correct, it might make a huge difference in that. So I applaud Missouri for being able to work with the social work and be able to bring that into the prisons. So thank you. Anxious to hear about the success of those projects, maybe at next year's panel. Thank you. John Powell. A man that I met when I was doing my master's work and got a master's in restorative justice. John was at that school and was doing restorative justice work. And so I was anxious when we went to North Carolina. I was anxious to find that John was at Campbell University doing work in the prisons in North Carolina and doing restorative justice work. So I'm so anxious and so pleased to be able to invite you here to be able to tell about some of the projects that you're doing. You're doing some restorative justice circles at a federal facility, as well as working on victim offender dialogue with the state prison. So tell us about the exciting work that you're doing down there.
I appreciate it, Greg. And my positive thought to Trevor a while ago was just the honor of being here with everybody and being able to talk about this work. Yeah. We created our restorative justice clinic at Campbell Law School 22 years ago. I was one of the people that was on the original task force. I wanted a program. I was working as a criminal defense attorney, and you mentioned frustration a while ago. I bet a lot of us are sitting in this room because we've been frustrated, and we want to find a better way, and that's why I'm sitting here. I was frustrated as a criminal defense attorney, working in a system that I thought was designed to meet people's needs, and boy, was I wrong about that. And that was extremely frustrating because I went to law school later in life than most. I wasn't old, but I was 36, and so a lot of people thought I was old. Hell, my classmates referred to me as the governor. That's how old they thought I was, and I guess it was my southern accent and all that kind of stuff. But working in that system for not very long let me know that I was probably in the wrong place to do what I wanted to do. And so I was introduced to this thing called restorative justice, and when this man named Tony Baker was telling me about it, I said, that's it. That's the answer to my frustration. Yeah. He wanted a clinical program in the law school. We didn't have one. He was brand new. He was coming to us from Pepperdine University, which has a world-renowned clinical program. I wanted something to serve the folks that I was representing and working with in our criminal legal system. Those two desires came together perfectly. And so we went to the dean, we went to the chief judge, and they loved the idea. and they put together a task force, half from Campbell Law School, half from the criminal legal system. And you'll notice I say criminal legal. I don't use the word justice a whole lot. I think it is fleeting, and that's part of my teaching with my students on day 2 is let's try to answer this question based on a murder case that went through a restorative process. What does justice require? And I just think that's a great way to get at this term of justice and what it should be. I also tell them if we all had a broad definition of justice, we wouldn't even need the term restorative justice because restoration would be embedded within how we understand what justice should be. So we worked on it. We put that thing together. I could feel that task force looking at me, and I knew what they were looking at. They were going to ask me to be the director. I was practicing law full time. I had my own gig going. That's the reason I went to law school later in life. I wanted to do my own thing. And before they could ask me, I said, look, y'all, I didn't do this to be the director. I got a law practice. And they kind of went, so then they gave me a proposition. They said, what if you and Tony did this together? I said, that sounds good to me. So we did it together for the first 2 years. He became a traitor, and he left on sabbatical leave and went to Yale Law School. And the dean said, you know, if you go back to your practice, we're going to have to fold up and do something else. I said, we cannot do that because after 2 years we had such great success. And that's when they asked me to be the full-time director. So I switched from full-time law practice to full-time restorative justice, part-time law practice, and 2 years later closed the doors to my office. I still have my license. If you get a speeding ticket, I can still help you. As long as you do it in the state of North Carolina, Mary. And if you know Mary, she's liable to get a speeding ticket. She's liable to get in some big trouble if you know Mary. She entertained me at dinner last night, and we had a ball. That was a treat for me. I do want to go back for a minute, though, because it used to be that I was begging people to let me come and talk to them about restorative justice. This was a foreign concept. Bringing victims and offenders together, there ain't no way in hell. Taking a victim into a prison to meet with the person that's offended either against them or their family member, there ain't no way we're going to do that. So I would beg people to let me come and talk. Sometimes they would say yes. They were not standing at the door asking me for my business card so that they could follow up with me. They were saying, here's your hat, what's your hurry, right? But you know what happened a couple of months ago? I get a text message from Greg Winship, and he says, we wonder if you would come and be on a panel at our symposium. That's the difference and the change, and I'm so glad for that. So restorative justice has come a long way. He talked about being at Eastern Mennonite. Howard Zare is called the grandfather of restorative justice, and he's been so instrumental in what I've been able to do. So we started as a diversion program for juvenile court because that was a safe place to be. And now we do juvenile court. We help kids stay in school by helping to resolve conflict. We do murder cases, rape cases. We go into prisons on a weekly basis 3 or 4 times a week. And we are taking law students in to do this work with us every time we do it. And I think that has a transformative effect on the way that they're going to practice law, the way that they see themselves as people. And I tell them all the time, this is not just going to make you a better lawyer. Being a better lawyer starts with being a better person. There are a lot of good lawyers. There are a few great lawyers. I think great lawyers start with being great people, and I think the work that we're able to do doing this work is a big part of that. So after hearing from Gloria this morning, I realized that the program that we just wrote a protocol for, Mary's good friend is Kim Banco, who directs our victim services, is named Victim Offender Dialogue. We're going to change the name of our program because we're going to try not to use that language. Because both of those terms are labeling. Yes. And a lot of victims will say, don't call me a victim. Survivor may be a better thing. A lot of offenders say, please don't call me an offender. Yeah. I try to say men and women, human beings, participants. A thought that I want to leave you with quickly before I just stop talking, because Greg, you know I can talk forever. I'm a lawyer. I get paid for the words. In the VOD case that we did that led us to the protocol that Kim drafted and we now have adopted so that this can be official within victim services, Holly Gilmore had been raped back in 1990 by Jimmy Jones, who broke in her apartment in Carrboro when she was a senior at Carolina and raped her in the wee hours of the morning. 30-some years later, she learned that part of his therapy was to talk to an empty chair. about what would you say to your victim if you had the opportunity. That didn't bother quite so much, but she saw a picture of the empty chair, and it had derogatory words written all over it, shame and guilt and all those kinds of things. And she said, that's not me. That cannot represent me and other victims. If he's going to talk to something, he needs to talk to me. So she made a request. Kim fielded the request. They reached out to me because the state didn't have a program, and we did that. And my first meeting with Holly, and this is going back to labels and dignity and all that, I said, how would you like for me to refer to Mr. Jones as we are having our conversations about this? She said, I have always referred to him as Mr. Jones, and I would appreciate it if you would do that too. And I said, I will do that. So when I was talking with her, he was Mr. Jones. When I was talking with him, and I asked him, how should I refer to you? And he said, Jimmy. So I always referred to him as Jimmy. In the meeting where we brought them together, she referred to him as Mr. Jones until we broke for lunch. And one thing that Jimmy had said to her in the opening statements about what is it that you hope to accomplish today, he said, I want to be able to tell Holly how sorry I am for what I have done to her. And I probably will never really understand what I've done to her and how she has suffered, but I know she has suffered. And I want to be able to apologize to her and tell her how badly I feel about that. And the other thing is, I hope she will be able to see my humanity. And I think that goes straight to the theme of dignity that we're talking about now. So she called him Mr. Jones for about the first 5 hours. We broke for lunch. We came back. Before we got started, she looked at me and she said, may I refer to him as Jimmy? I said, absolutely. So she called him Jimmy from then on. And I just think that's important when we talk about dignity and we talk about seeing people's humanity. And I think that's a good example of that. So that's part of the facilitated dialogue program that we now have in North Carolina. And so it can be advertised. And one reason I'm so glad about that is I do a lot of circle work in prisons, and we talk about restorative justice, and a lot of the men and women that we work with in prison say, I wish I could have that facilitated dialogue with people that I've hurt. Well, but this has to come from victims. They have to ask for it. We would never go to a victim and say, hey, your offender wants to talk to you, because that is a reviolation. And so it comes from victims. Now it can be advertised. And so many people that we work with will have the opportunity to enter into this and enjoy that. I have brought some things with me. I want to share one of those things with you right now to get to the humanizing effect of this, and then I promise, Greg, I'll be quiet and you can move on. I do like to let other people speak for me many times. I brought a handkerchief with me today. May not seem special, but this was a handkerchief that was given to one of our fellows on death row in North Carolina, and it was a treasured item for him. There were several people. The mother of one of his residents on death row brought these and gave them as gifts, and so they were in very limited quantity. On a checkout round after we had done our first circle, and by the way, when we do our circles, we do them on a weekly basis, about 2 hours at a time with the same men and women every time, and my students are involved in that. We were doing a checkout round with a talking piece, so we pass it when it comes to you. It's your opportunity to answer the prompt. Timmy was sitting right beside me. It went around. He was the last person to speak. And he said, my checkout is, I just want to let you know that I hate men that wear cowboy boots. I'm going to tell you something. When you know the guy's there because he's killed somebody, and he says that to you, you get a little nervous. My wife does this work with me. She was sitting there with me, and when we left, she said, so, wearing cowboy boots anymore? I said, every damn time. Because I need him to understand that a man that wears cowboy boots can love him. This treasure that he had, this handkerchief, this is what he gave me on the last day. To John Powell, love Timmy Jr. He drew a circle on it to represent our circle time. And on the other side, and I'm going to be sitting right over here, I'm happy you to come look at this, is a cowboy boot with roses in it. And he told us how much he appreciated us seeing his humanity. And Timmy, as we've already heard, many people that are in our facilities have mental health issues, and he did. We could see him settling down over the course of those 12 weeks that we were together. So that's probably more than you wanted right now, but a little bit about the work that we do through our clinic in North Carolina.
Thank you, John. Thank you. I think a lot of you in the room know that my day job is with the Center for Conflict Resolution, and we are working at the Transition Center of Kansas City. Shout out back there. And we are working on bringing restorative processes to that facility. We've been there for 3 years now, and hold those circle processes, do those same types of situations at the Transition Center of Kansas City. And I'll shout out Michelle Tippy is back there, the superintendent. If anybody wants to visit, and see what's going on down there, I'd invite you to talk to her or myself, and we'll make that happen. We took a group down last night at 8 or 9 o'clock last night to be able to give them the tour, and the guys enjoyed it, they enjoyed it, and it was good. Finally, Curtis.
Yes.
Curtis Taylor with the Bob Barker Foundation. Love having you up here. Enjoy all the interactions that we've had in North Carolina and up here. I'm anxious for you to be able to tell about the innovative programs that Bob Barker Foundation supports. And so I think you've picked a couple of those. I picked one of those for you.
Yes, you did.
But you picked a couple of those for us to talk about, because one of these is near and dear to my heart. In fact, somebody here just came up and talked to me about wanting to open a restaurant, and I said, "Wait till the next panel. You're going to hear a good version of that." So, Edwin's Restaurant and the Leadership Academy in Cleveland, Ohio, is one.
Yes.
And the
Hudson Link
in New York. So tell us about those programs.
Yeah, thank you, Greg. First, let me just introduce myself. My name is Curtis Taylor, and I am a person in long-term recovery. And for me, that means I have not used alcohol or any other substance since December 23rd, 2002. That is the day, that is the moment that my Lord and Savior Jesus Christ delivered me from substance use disorder. During my addiction, I'm also formerly incarcerated. I served time in the North Carolina Department. I was going to say Department of Corrections, but maybe I should say Department of Helping. How's that? I don't know. Maybe that'll catch on, right? And I could not be more grateful and more honored to currently serve in the capacity of Executive Director of the Bob Barker Foundation with Nancy and the Bob Barker family. It's an incredible journey. God has been truly, truly good to me and continues to be. And so, yeah, when Greg asked me to come on this panel, my first thought was, this whole panel should be Greg telling his story. When I first heard his journey, I was blown away, and I continue to be blown away by what Greg does. Can we have another round of applause for Greg Winship? And real quick, before I want to do these two organizations justice, can I say justice?
You can.
Do that.
It's okay.
I want to give them their due. But let me just say that those of us that have been incarcerated, we understand there's a humiliation. There's a degradation that goes along with that circumstance. Everything from the handcuffs to the strip searching to the being on the road squad and things of that nature. It's a very dehumanizing experience. And I don't know that we necessarily talk about it that way enough, especially on the male side. But I'll be vulnerable today and say, yes, it was a definite, very, very humiliating experience for me. And there was some trauma there. I've dealt with it through God. But when we started talking about the restoration of dignity, my entire heart, my ears perk up, everything inside of me gets excited about that. Because at the end of the day, we're all just human beings. And I have a clear understanding that there's no person on this planet that's any better than or any less than any other individual on this planet, regardless of race or color or whatever mistakes we've made. If we all get honest, every one of us makes mistakes every single day. So none of us should stand in judgment of another person. Yes, there are mistakes that have dire consequences. I get that. But to see heads of departments of corrections up here on this stage talking about restoring dignity to the lives of incarcerated individuals, I think that's something that we can all get excited about. So I'm grateful for that. I'll start with Hudson Link for Higher Education in Prison, which was formed in 1998 in an attempt to use the transformative power of higher education to change the lives both during and after incarceration. Over the past 27 years, there are now well over 2,000 Hudson Link graduates, and that number continues to grow. Support during the post-release period is essential to maximizing the impact of the educational work done on the inside. Their mission is to provide college education, life skills, and reentry support to currently and formerly incarcerated individuals, resulting in lower rates of recidivism and higher rates of employment and success. Hudson Link was founded in response to the decision in 1994 to abolish the Pell Tuition grants for incarcerated individuals. Their first class of 16 men has now grown to well over 600 students across 5 correctional facilities. Partnerships with local colleges provide accredited degrees, remedial support, and specialized academic coordinators, and they have awarded over 1,300 college degrees to date. Yeah. Their post-release support helps students continue their education or vocational training after their release. And they also provide free professional clothing, laptops, and cell phones. There's also transitional housing and case management. Their graduates have a recidivism rate of under 2%.
Wow.
Their graduates, yeah, have a recidivism rate of under 2%. And this is in comparison to both statewide and national rates, somewhere between 43% and as high as 68% in some cases. They advocate for federal and state aid for incarcerated students and participate in the New York Consortium for Higher Education in Prison, as well as the National Conference on Higher Education in Prison. Again, that's Hudson Link for Higher Education in Prison. And then the one that Greg picked out for me, which let me tell you, I cannot wait to do my site visit for this one.
I'm coming with you.
Come on, brother. So this one's called Edwin's Leadership and Restaurant Institute in Cleveland, Ohio. They believe that every human being, regardless of their past, has the right to a fair and equal future. Their initial programming in 2 Ohio prisons in 2011, teaching a culinary course and providing hope and marketable job skills to the incarcerated, and their initial results were very clear. Those folks who completed the program did not return to prison. This is a tuition-free program certified by the Ohio State Board of Career Colleges and Schools, and a 900-hour program includes classroom and experiential learning in culinary arts. There are over 650 graduates with a recidivism rate of 1.4%. Now, they're becoming even more innovative, and their curriculum is also available on tablets in prisons. There are over 100,000 active users of their curriculum in 46 different states. They have a new location in Cleveland, which can host up to 400 diners at one time. Their students in the 6-month program, they learn during the day, and then they apply the concepts of what they learned at night in 4 distinct culinary and hospitality concepts. That's fine dining, a brasserie, craft cocktail lounge, and a cigar bar. I bet that stinks. I can't stand cigars. Edwin's now helps graduates of its tablet program with life plans that guide them to Cleveland or connects them to the resources needed for successful reentry in their own home state. Hundreds of life plans for returning citizens are developed monthly for those who stay near their homes. Their wraparound support includes 5 residential buildings for students, alumni, and families. There's free childcare, case managers, career placement assistance, and much, much more. Edwin's does not take neither federal or state funding, which allows it to take on those who are most in need of its support and services while aggressively disrupting the reentry world. Edwin's Leadership in Restaurant Institute.
I've talked from day one at TCKC that we need to open up a restaurant down in the West Bottoms and staff it with TCKC people. So this is our connection to be able to get that to happen. Director Foley needs some support with that one. Okay. We'll tell you more. Wow. These are programs that you're not going to hear about other places, right? Have you ever heard about some of these programs yet? In some that's been talked about here? These are truly innovative programs that are happening right here. And unless you came to this event, you might not know about those, right? They go under the radar sometimes. Sometimes we want to go under the radar at first to see if they work, right? And because it's such a big change. But the innovative steps that we're taking in corrections, I think, is promising for our future. I want to ask each of you, just for a brief second, what do you think is the best part of the program that you talked about? What is going to be the biggest change that you see from that, and how soon do you think that can happen, or is it already happening with what's going on? Start with you, Carter.
Start with me?
Yeah, we'll go backwards.
So what's the best part, like, from these two organizations in particular?
And from any of the organizations that you all fund. You fund over 500 organizations, I believe.
Well over, yeah.
Well over 500 organizations. What keeps you doing that? What is the goal that keeps you going with that?
I think that probably one of the greatest aspects of programs like these two in particular is the transformation that takes place. So I remember when I went back to school, I was way beyond 36 when I went back to school to pursue my bachelor's in social work, and that, I don't know, there's a sense of accomplishment that's just embedded in that process. You know, as you sit down 2, 3, 4 o'clock in the morning writing those research papers, and the return on that investment is a grade of an A. There's this thing inside of us that I don't know, it gets excited about the completion of something. I'll never forget walking across that stage during graduation, and as much as God just changed me miraculously on the inside in my moment of deliverance, that educational process also transformed me and changed me in ways that I'll probably never fully comprehend or be able to convey. And so that's what these folks are getting. Even in regards to the Edwin's Leadership and Restaurant Institute, there's a respect that's developed, a self-respect on that individual, a self-efficacy that increases exponentially when a person is able to accomplish what these folks are accomplishing. And when you go from, sleeping on a 2-inch thick mattress on the floor in the overcrowded county jail and being called an inmate and an offender, to now being called a chef in a crisp, clean, they only use like the most expensive material in these chef uniforms, and being able to say that you graduated and you got a bachelor's in this or an associate's in that, that's a long way. Yeah. The before and after picture there is mind-blowing. And so I believe that's one of the greatest things about this, is that it's one thing to keep people out of prison. It's a whole nother thing to allow people the opportunity to live a full life, right? To be able to do and become someone that now my children can be proud of me, and now my children are more likely to graduate college than they are to ever go to prison.
Yeah, good.
So that's part of what does it for us. That's the heart.
Thank you. I was associated with a college program inside of a facility for over 10 years, and it was during the 90s with the Pell Grant options. They had that, and then it was taken away. And during that time, the college did a study and found out that education in prison was one of the best factors that determined lower recidivism rates. There was a direct correlation between the more education you got on any level, whether it was vocational programming, college degrees, anything else. Any increase in education that people got behind bars lowered recidivism rates on the outside. And so programs that educate and continue to educate, whether it's a formal education, whether it's education about mental and emotional and traumatic situations that we can bring out, like what you're doing with the Circle projects, that can help lower recidivism rates. John, tell us just a minute, what's the impact that you've seen with those programs?
Well, what I see in all that we do in restorative justice work is the reclaiming human dignity and humanity. And whether we're doing a facilitated dialogue or whether we're doing a circle, I think that's what we're doing. I'm bad for telling stories and giving examples. I'll try to be brief. I did bring an article with me today that was written by Thorny Lee Cooper, who is currently incarcerated in Sampson Correctional, where they've got a lot of good things going on. Those educational programs are part of what they're doing. Thorny was sentenced for murder under a strange law back in the 90s that said if you are sentenced to life without parole after 25 years of incarceration, you can get a review for the possibility of parole. And so after 25 years, his first opportunity came up, and he was brought up for review in front of a Superior Court judge. The sister of the man that he killed was invited to come in and speak, and so she spoke for him to remain in prison. What happened, though, was she saw him for the first time in 25 years since she had seen him when he was convicted in a courtroom in that same town. And she began to wonder humanity. She saw him for who he is today and not who he was back then. For a long time, her defense mechanism had been to keep him as a monster who had killed her brother. But she saw him in a courtroom, and she heard him speak. He spoke on his behalf. And he was represented by an attorney that spoke on his behalf as well. And she began to think this might not be the same person that I knew. Out of that and out of conversations between the prosecutor that represented the state and worked closely with her, conversations that that prosecutor had with the defense attorney who had represented Thorny. And by the way, that defense attorney had been one of my students in my clinical program years ago, and he knew about it. They began to have conversations. I wonder if Anya would be interested in having a conversation with Thorny. Started having that conversation with her, and she said she would. Let's just start by talking to this guy that y'all are talking about at Campbell Law, and let me learn more. That's how the process started. Victims need to ask for this. Survivors need to ask for this. So we started that conversation, and we all agreed. And I met with her. I met with Thorny. Robert Van Gorder is our warden in that Sampson facility. This guy is amazing. If he's not listening and hear me say that, Mary, tell him next time you see him that I said that. I love the guy. And he opened those doors for me to go in and have those meetings and then ultimately to bring them together. At that meeting, and Thorny wrote this, I'm going to send this to you, Greg, by the way, and Thorny's given permission for this to be used anywhere that you would like to use it. He talks about the hearing. He talks about being denied parole. He talks about subsequently being invited into this process and what it meant to him. So we did bring them together. It didn't take long that day as she was telling him about the impact that the murder had had on her life that she said, but I also need to let you know something. She said, I'm a believer, and she said, I just need you to know I have forgiven you for what you've done. He wrote in here, when it came time for him to talk, he fumbled the ball. He couldn't speak. The only language he had was tears, and he did. He fell apart. He cried for a while. They actually embraced each other before that meeting was over. I picked her up that morning from her home down near Wilmington, and I took her home. I said, Anya, you got to tell me something. You never told me that you forgave him. Where'd that come from? She said, when I got in your truck this morning, I knew that I needed to let him know that. It just came over me that I had forgiven him for this, and I need to get in that place for myself. And so out of that, she said, I think we need to have another meeting because he's going to be coming up for another parole hearing. And quite frankly, as long as he's in the system, she's in the system. And she said, I need to advocate for him to be released for his sake and for mine. And so we did have another meeting. She showed up at the hearing. The judge granted her request to have a meeting with him in private so she could express, not in open court in front of people that may be dead set against this, so that she could express what she wanted. And at the end of the day, that judge recommended release. And it is now, we talked about parole boards a while ago. I love that discussion. Just because the judge said I recommend it doesn't mean it's happening. Our parole board in North Carolina is now reviewing that. I do believe they're walking him toward a path for release. So restoring human dignity and recognizing people's humanity. I knew after meeting with them, I thought if Anya sits with him, it's going to make a difference. And it made a tremendous difference to both of them.
That's great. Thank you, John. Yeah. Two thoughts with that. I keep coming back to Sue Ellen's phrase that she's addicted to personal transformation. What better stories of personal transformation, right? And note to Mary, we need to see if Sonny's in our Reaching Out From Within program at Sampson. See if we can get him in there. Director Foley, in 25 words or less, explain your vision for that.
Sorry about that.
Not a problem.
You have so much ahead of you, right? You've been in the job for a year and a half or so, a little over a year, but yet just got confirmed recently to be director. The future, to me, looks bright. How do you see the future of Missouri Department of Corrections in 25 words or less? I know I'm asking a huge question here, but what do you see as moving forward? High priorities.
I'd like to continue the path we're on. I think that embracing a mission of the success of the people that are under our supervision and in our custody is our mission. Yeah. Historically, corrections has, Dr. Brian, I'm going over 25 words.
You're good.
Dr. Brian Lovins is a researcher at University of Cincinnati, and I will give him full credit for this. He kind of encapsulated, I think, the approach as succinctly as anybody I've ever heard. He said, do you want to be a referee or do you want to be a coach? And referees call fouls. Yeah. They have no vested interest in the outcome. Their only job is a level playing field. And coaches seek improvement. And every coach I've ever had still believed in accountability. Accountability has to remain a part of our system. That is an expectation of the public. And that will remain a part of our system. But to what end? To what goal? And a goal of improvement, to me, seems like a laudable goal. So I'm hopeful that that's our direction.
So I'll just throw this out there that maybe we can change the names of correctional officers to coaches. Maybe we'd get a different result. Think about that one. We won't hold you to that right now. Sounds like a good idea to me, though. Thank you, panel. Thank you for being here. Appreciate all of your thoughts. Let's give them another round of applause. We did go a little bit over, and I apologize for that, but I needed to hear some of this conversation. Lunch is about ready. It is buffet out in the hall, so we will break for about 35 minutes for lunch. Please be back in here. By 12 o'clock, we have some awards to give out at 12 o'clock, and then we will start our breakout session at 1:15 for the next panel. So we will see, oh no, I'm sorry. We have our guest speaker at 12:15.